Hello everyone, my name is Vince Gelm and it's lovely to be here with you in the forest. The sun behind me, as I think you might be able to see there. And I was lying here resting. I was laying down on my blanket, feet on the moss in front of this beautiful tree. And I thought to myself, the forest is a place I come for rest. So I thought, wow, that's a really cool wordplay. The forest is a place we come for rest. So anyways, I wanted to share that new wordplay. You might know that I love secret meanings, hidden meanings in words, and I might have one for you today. We'll find out. So I'd like to talk to you about evolution and soul evolution, and that what if we defined evolution as a process of expanding our thresholds for experience. So in expanding our thresholds for experience, we evolve. Our evolution depends on expanding our thresholds for experience. And I want to give you 3 specific types of experience in this video. And these experiences, these types of experience came to me in a dream, an amazing dream. This dream, I dreamt it probably about two years ago. So let's just jump in right now, and I want to share this dream with you. So I dreamt that I was in a tribal society, in a very traditional indigenous society, and I met the chief of the village, and she invited me into her home or her hut. And we sat down. I think she might have offered me a drink. And she said to me, here in our village, and I should also say my sense was that it was a pretty advanced society. This was a more advanced society than what we're used to, certainly here in the West. So she said, in our society, we assess someone's spiritual maturity, someone's spiritual evolution, based on their thresholds for experience. And there are 3 categories that we assess them on. Number 1, what is their threshold for feeling? Now, feeling, I want to make clear, is not just emotion, but sensation. So emotion would be obviously sadness, anger, fear, disgust, and we could also say joy. But sensation would be what's your threshold for feeling, for instance, tightness in your throat, or just general energy coursing through your body. Electricity coursing through your body, prana coursing through your body. So it can be different things. It can be general discomfort in your belly. One of the things that I was in my training as a somatic therapist, I was a registered somatic therapist. I closed my practice down to do the work I do now around healing with people around the world. One of the things that we were trained on was to monitor our clients' window of tolerance. Window of tolerance is a term that came from Dr. Dan Siegel. So the window of tolerance, think of it as sort of like there's a top end and a low end, and what we're doing is we're seeing where our clients are at within that window in terms of what their tolerance is in any given moment for what they're feeling. So if a client starts to begin to feel, say, fear in their system, which may manifest as anxiety, we want to see, are they right at the edge where they're about to just tip over and become very dysregulated in their system? Or are they in a middle area where they're more safe in their body and they can handle how much they're feeling in their system? So it's an interesting term, is what is your window of tolerance for anger? What is your window of tolerance for sadness? How much room do you create in your system for different sensations, different emotions? How much tolerance does does a person have for feeling tightness in their throat? Because they may need to feel that tightness in their throat to clear out tightness in their throat, because often when something is cleared, we feel it on the way out. And if we don't have a very high threshold for feeling discomfort in our throat, for feeling tightness, we may not be able to move through that. Okay, so that was part of what I was trained to pay attention to. I should also say, if this is the top end of the window of tolerance, your healing actually happens here, just at that edge, right? If you're too much here, you're in your comfort zone. It's actually we want our clients to be able to encroach that edge safely. We want to make sure they're safe, but we want to expand and bump up. You're not going to move and expand your threshold for grief or tightness in your throat if you're hanging out in the center. It's actually by moving to the edge that we can slowly and safely expand our client's threshold for feeling. And as that box increases, as that window of tolerance increases, and they can allow for more feeling in their body, they expand their capacity to heal, to transform those experiences in their body. So that's what we're doing. One way to understand healing is we're increasing our capacity to be with sensation and emotion in the body. And it's a good time to remind you that healing is not necessarily about feeling better, but being better able to feel. So it's not necessarily about feeling better when we move up to that edge, but it is about being able to feel more deeply, feel more at gradual stages. And we always want to make sure the client is safe, not necessarily comfortable. Without safety, they're not going to expand their threshold. It can really slingshot them backwards into some form of dysregulation or shutdown in their system. So the first threshold that the chief of the village said to me that they assess people's evolution on, or spiritual maturity on, is what is their threshold for feeling? What is their threshold for feeling? Sensation, emotion. She didn't say sensation or emotion, but I want to add that to the mix. The second thing that she said was, we assess people's threshold for uncertainty. So how much uncertainty can you be with versus needing to cling to knowing, needing things to be a certain way, needing things to be predictable, routine, in a box, status quo, hanging on to this is it thinking, black and white thinking. How much permission do you give yourself to let go of one vine but not reach for the next and hang out in that space between? So that's a really important threshold, especially when we consider what's going on in the world right now, because we're moving into such great degrees of uncertainty, and there's such a cry to go back to normal. People so badly want normal to come back. And that's the cry of someone who has a low threshold for uncertainty. And they want certainty. They want the certainty of what was. They don't want the uncertainty of what is. They want the certainty of what was. And when you have a low threshold for uncertainty, it's much harder to transition through change, isn't it? Because change is about going through some rite of passage through uncertainty, right? I mean, if you have a low threshold for uncertainty, it might be harder to end a relationship with someone, because that means going from some level of known familiarity into unknown, right? You're single again. Maybe you haven't been in touch with your friends for a while because you've been so ensconced in this relationship. And so there's this sort of wide open sea, a wilderness that you're now entering into that's scary for you. And you don't want to go into that. So if you have a low threshold for uncertainty, you may be more inclined to hang in that relationship longer than what's healthy. But I also said the word scary. It's scary, the uncertainty. And so this is where one threshold ties into the next. If this person has a low threshold for uncertainty, that can also tie into fear. And if someone has a low threshold for fear, then they're going to have a hard time being with the emotions that come with uncertainty. Does that make sense? So if I can't be with the fear, then it's going to be harder to move into the uncertainty. If I can't be with grief, the grief of letting go of this person, then I may be more inclined to hang on to this relationship and stay in certainty. Because really, grief is such a important emotion, a critical emotion to help us move from one thing to another. Grief is what helps us let go. Grief is what helps us accept something is over and open to something new. And grief is also a way to really honor what was, because if I can really let myself feel my grief, then I can also feel how much love I have for this person that I've been in a relationship with for 5 years, because my grief is my love. It's actually by feeling my grief that I feel my love for this person. I feel my love for everything we've gone through together. And it's actually by feeling that grief and feeling that love and letting it move through me that I can more easily accept the truth of what I'm experiencing right now and transition into uncertainty. Now, I just said the word truth because that's the third threshold that the chief said to me. She said, the third threshold is, what is your threshold for truth? What is your threshold for truth? So the three thresholds that they use to assess someone's spiritual maturity, someone's spiritual evolution in that village is, what is your threshold for feeling, uncertainty, and truth? So let's use our example of this relationship again. If I have a low threshold for truth, then I might have a hard time seeing the truth that this is actually a dysfunctional relationship, that it has run its course, that I'm not happy, that this person's actually treating me disrespectful. If I have a low threshold for truth, then what I might do is convince myself of everything that isn't true. I might convince myself that this person does care for me when really this person doesn't. I may convince myself that it is viable long-term when really it's not a viable long-term relationship, right? So a lot of times what happens is people want clarity. So one of the things that people pray for the most is clarity. Please, one of the most common ones is, why is there so much evil in the world? Someone might pray to Jesus or Mother Mary or Kuan Yin or God. Why is there so much evil in the world? Why is there so much suffering? What is my purpose in this planet? Why is my son sick all the time? People pray for clarity a lot. That's one of the things they really ask for. But the thing is that people often pray for clarity, but they simultaneously don't want to know the truth. Because if they know the truth, that's going to bring up uncomfortable feelings, and such as, oh, I'm afraid now, given the truth that I now know, because now that I know the truth, now that I have clarity, it means that I may have to make a difficult decision based on that newfound clarity. I may have to leave this relationship. So on the one hand, we want clarity, but with clarity can bring up uncomfortable emotions. What is your threshold for feeling? And it can bring up uncomfortable truths, the fact that this relationship really is dysfunctional, and it may bring up the fact that uncertainty is before us, because now I have to leave this relationship. So you can begin to see how these three thresholds of feeling, uncertainty, and truth are all woven together. They're not separate. They interrelate in an infinitely number of wonderful ways. So again, just to be very clear on that, we pray for clarity, but we're afraid of the clarity simultaneously. And that really speaks to, what is our threshold for truth? What is it we're willing to actually take in that is uncomfortable? And if we have a higher threshold for feeling, we're going to have a higher threshold for truth. Because with our spiritual evolution, we have to be willing to open to to disturbing truths sometimes, difficult truths. I mean, look at what's going on in the world right now. People are waking up to the disturbing truths at hand, that there is a global totalitarian takeover. That's a disturbing truth. That's just one level of it. We don't have to go into the immense child sex trafficking and exploitation. We don't have to go into the fact that they're trying to hijack our food supply and eradicate farmers, etc., and move us into a digital dictatorship. We don't have to go there. Or we can. But the point I'm making is that these are such big truths, and one reason people are not open to it is because they have a lower threshold for truth. And they have a lower threshold for truth because they have a lower threshold for uncertainty and a lower threshold for, or a low threshold for feeling, right? There's a saying that the truth hurts, right? There's a saying that the truth hurts. The truth, if people let in the truth of what's going on in the world right now, if they let in the truth of what they've put in their body, of what they've put in their child's body, what emotion is that going to elicit in them? It's going to elicit outrage, disgust, immense grief, fear. It's going to elicit all these emotions. So what happens is that people, in an act of self-preservation, close themselves off from these truths because they're too disturbing and because they can't be with the disturbances in their body because they have a low threshold for that particular kind of experience, for feeling. You see? The truth hurts. The truth hurts. And if I have spent a lifetime, if I've spent my entire life being numb to my body and being afraid of the difficult feelings in my body and not doing my healing work and not dealing with the shame and the fear and the anger that I've suppressed from childhood, or patterns that I've carried through many lifetimes, if I have avoided what's in my body as an act of self-preservation, if I can't be with the disturbances in my body, then I'm going to have a harder time being with the disturbances out there, because those disturbances are going to create disturbances in my body. And so if I've created a life of suppressing those disturbances inside, I'm going to push that away. I'm going to push that away. If I'm too afraid to know the truths in my body, and some of those truths might be memories, and memory might be that, around sexual abuse. It might be, it could be a truth that maybe my parents didn't have my best interests at heart, and I've been believing as a survival adaptation, as a coping mechanism, that they did treat me well, when really they didn't. Because that's what children do. They make their parents infallible as a way to survive childhood adversity. If I continue to deny the fact that maybe my parents weren't infallible and maybe they did harm me, if I continue to deny the truth of what was real and raw and painful in my childhood, then it's going to be much harder for me to be with the real, raw, and painful truths that are outside, that are in this world. So you can begin to see, and I'll add, and then you see, if I let in those truths, then what? This is the uncertainty piece. Then what? Then what does this say about my relationship with my parents now, who I've come to love, who I've come to, I go on golf trips with my dad and I spend time with my mother, and now I'm realizing that maybe they weren't as kind to me as I thought, because now I've done some healing work on myself. I've done some shamanic journeys, I've worked with some therapists, and I've come to realize that my childhood is not what I thought, and that I suppressed a lot of truths and I denied a lot of things in order to cope, because I needed to have a picture of my parents as being all good and kind, because I needed that image. I needed that picture of them to survive, because I was an attachment-driven child. And we know that if a child has to choose between attachment and authenticity, they're going to choose attachment. So what that means is they're going to deny their truth. They're going to deny what's real in order to maintain some semblance of secure attachment. They're choosing survival because it's not safe to know the truth. It's not safe to feel the truth. And so 30 years later as an adult, it's still not safe to know the truth. It's still not safe to feel the truth until we do some healing work, until we uncover these old truths, these painful truths in our body through our healing work. And now I increase my threshold for experience. Now I increase my window of tolerance. And now I have a greater capacity. I'm more resourced to take in the larger, painful truths and the uncertainties that come with that. You see how is this making sense to all of you? So if you begin to understand evolution and spiritual maturity within the context of these three thresholds, then you will have a better understanding of why people are struggling in the world still to take in the raw, painful truths that there is not just corruption, but significant evil taking place. And not just some corruption, but loads of it, far more than people can imagine. This is huge. You and I both know how big this is in the world. Like, this isn't just some ordinary truth. This is monster truths that are unfolding in the world. These are monster truths that people are waking up to. This isn't just like a, 5 out of 10 truth. This is a 12 out of 10 truth. These are 12 out of 10 truths emerging. So if someone has a low threshold for feeling uncertainty and truth, and there's monster truths out there that are unfolding, then how much room do they have inside themselves to take that in? So what's happening is that as these truths come out, and they're coming out now in such a degree that it's becoming more and more obvious, and soon they're going to be forced upon people. In fact, they are already being forced upon people. The very fact that you have all this farmland being confiscated, it's becoming more obvious. But so what's happening in that is people's thresholds are going to become increasingly forced up. They're going to be forced up. They won't be able to deny anymore. And what's going to happen when the thresholds for truth and uncertainty and feeling go up, and I'm really looking at feeling, what's going to happen is you're going to have a lot of people who are going to need tremendous healing support, because they're going to be overtaken again by shock, horror, disgust, fear, grief, right? A whole range. So people can only deny for so long. And so this is a very harsh evolutionary catalyst that we're in right now that is going to force these thresholds to go up, whether people like it or not. And some people may not be able to handle it. Some people may not be able to handle it. But so this is why I've said in the past that we are going to need legions of healing practitioners who are not just skilled, not just compassionate, not just wise, but they have to have been, in my opinion, tuned in for a good while to what's going on in the world. Not just discovering it with their pained clients. We need people a legion of healers who have been awake to the larger picture for a while. Healers with large, pretty decently high thresholds themselves. So I want to just summarize by saying to you all, this is a way to understand evolution. Evolution is, and it's not the only way, obviously, I'm just sharing one way to define evolution. Evolution is the journey through many lifetimes of expanding our thresholds for experience, and specifically the experiences of feeling, uncertainty, and truth. And we are put into positions, or as souls, we incarnate into circumstances that expand those thresholds in different ways, given what our evolutionary needs are. So we may choose this family in this environment, and it might be a very difficult environment. As a soul, we may choose to incarnate in that very difficult home, but what it's going to do is that it's going to push us, it's going to catalyze us, it's going to make us expand our thresholds for experience, make us feel more, make us open more. And one thing that I'm sure you'll agree with is that when people have difficult lifetimes, when people go through adversity, I know that's true for me, that's when we really accelerate our growth, as opposed to if everything's just going nice and smooth and as planned. If everything's going as planned, well, how much are you going to expand your threshold for truth if you're just going along with what you plan, right? And if you're going, how much are you going to expand your threshold for feeling if you're staying in this sort of status quo? You're in that middle area of the window of tolerance. So that's what I want to offer to you, and I thank you all for listening. And if you're interested in expanding your thresholds for feeling, uncertainty, and truth, I'm continuing to offer online healing and activation ceremonies this weekend, 3rd and 4th. It'll be Archangel Michael and Raphael, and the following weekend, the 10th and the 11th, will be with the Magical Unicorn. Yes, the Magical Unicorn. And the Council of Shamanic Elders, So these are online healing and activation ceremonies. They're 77 Canadian, 75 minutes long. I'll put a link in the description. And please leave your comments, subscribe, click notifications, like, and I'll see you when I see you. Thanks, everyone.